So I see it's 4 o'clock and I think we're all here. So I'm going to call the June 7th, 2021 Select Board meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. And I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Ms. Escobedo.
Present.
Ms. Hotchkiss.
Present.
Ms. Ackerman.
Present.
Mr. Johnson.
Present.
Myself, Ms. Bates, present.
Thank you. The entire Select Board is here. Thank you, as always. I'm going to read the consent agenda. Minutes to approve for the May 3rd, 2021 Select Board meeting. One-day special liquor licenses for Vero Farm, 11 Wheeler Road, 6/18/21, from 6 to 9 p.m., wine and malt beverages only. And for the Voyager Publishing at 53 Cambridge Turnpike on 6/15/21, from 5 to 7, wine and malt beverages only. And there will be a proclamation, which we'll deal with later, for Jane Hotchkiss, and also to rescind Concord's declaration of emergency effective June 15th, 2021. And I've also seen, it's someone Could someone please read the remainder, the clerk, please read the remainder of the consent agenda for me, please?
Yes. Gift acceptance, Rotary Club of Concord, gift totaling $8,786.22 in partnership with the Concord Garden Club for the following work on the Veterans Memorial Site. Water fountain, $3,529.06. Landscaping, $5,127. New service flags, $130.16. Move to approve the consent agenda.
And with special thanks to the Rotary Club and the Garden Club for taking on that project. All right.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss.
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman.
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
That's unanimous and the chair so declares. I think we're now ready for the town manager's report.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Excuse me. So I just want to, as a part of my town manager's report, I'm going to be sharing my screen and presenting some information that was in the packet about, we're calling it reopening of town offices, but that really is a bit of a misnomer since town offices have been working fully throughout, really for most of the pandemic, in some cases throughout the entirety of it. But first, I just want to touch on a couple of things. We were talking a little bit before the start of the meeting about the heat this week, and so I think I would just remind people to be mindful of non-essential energy consumption. You saw the signs out from CMLP that did send a notice out about peak demand. So just a reminder about that. And the other thing is, this is not on my memo, but I'm sure you've seen notifications from Concord Public Works about, water use. As the board knows, NAGOG is still offline, and that is our primary summer surge capacity. And so until the intake work is complete, we're asking that people really limit their watering and other non-essential water use. So those are two reminders. Getting to my printed report, I'll be very brief. We have one more second dose clinic that we'll be having up at the CCHS, and then after that, we will begin the process of decommissioning that clinic, taking that structure down and kind of unwiring both literally and metaphorically. We feel like the public health director and the Board of Health have looked at this, and we're in a good spot, and we'll be able to do that and make other arrangements if we needed to do additional vaccines. So I don't have an update on the open meeting law provisions. I haven't seen anything today about any action by the legislature, but we are keeping an eye on that. And another thing that happens is that the police department did receive a letter of certification from the Massachusetts Police Accreditation. commission, and that's a big deal. As you know, the police department is pursuing accreditation, and certification is an important benchmark in that pursuit. So it really is a sign that the police department is really very well managed and staffed, and has excellent structure and policies and procedures. So congratulations to them. Another feel-good item is we did get an award. The police department, I know, was involved in this, the Safe Routes to School Award for Community Collaboration. So the town of Concord did receive that award for a bike safety event that some cycling advocates in Concord, as well as the police department and the school district, partnered on. So kind of proud of that one. I think I reported on that event and had a picture or two in my previous town manager's report. And now it is an award-winning event. So congratulations to them. And then I'll touch on the item in my printed report about the permits and DPLM, but just a couple other items from CPW that are ongoing. And with that, excuse me, I'll share my screen. Okay, can everybody see the slideshow?
Yes, I can see it.
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to go through this very quickly. This is the presentation about our proposed, or our projected, I should say, town department reopening schedules. And again, I need to reiterate that many town departments have been on site working fully for many, many months. When we talk about reopening, we really are talking more about reopening to in-person work. And as a part of this transition, we have three main goals. Maintain full services to the public. We want to retain the lessons that we learned during the pandemic about work, specifically, and about how we work and about how we serve the community. And then we want to pilot these new approaches to work and make sure we get public feedback on these new approaches, so we can make changes as needed. But I think, as you'll see, we really want to, I don't want to, the term new normal has gotten kind of cliched, but I think it is appropriate in this instance, because it really is a very different way of looking at things. So to maintain full services to the public, really, it just really goes to, what does it mean to be open? Like, what does open mean? And so for us, we've defined that two different ways. In-person hours, meaning they're open for unscheduled, or sometimes called walk-in service, or you can call and generally we'll be able to pick up the phone, or you can set up a meeting via video conference, Zoom or Microsoft Teams or something like that. This is really, when we talk about hours that'll be on the doorways of buildings, these are the hours that we're talking about, the hours for in-person service. Operating hours are part of this presentation for really not only the community's benefit, but also the board's benefit, to understand that work will still be happening for a full work week, and really more than a full work week. It's just a compression of the time where in-person hours are available, and there's reasons for that I'll go into. So operating hours, they're there. Public services are available by appointment in most cases, or over the phone or via video conference. But you may not get somebody during those hours, but the people are still working, in terms of doing their at their desks, doing their jobs in most cases. So these hours, like I said, are just for reference for the purposes of this presentation. The operating hours really reflect the pre-COVID schedules, but there are a lot more methods of providing services as a result of the pandemic and changes that we made to our operations. And so that has really affected our thinking in terms of in-person versus operating. Like I said, it's a very new way of looking at it here. The one thing I'll note is typical, very traditional in-service or in-person services like tax payments, permitting, and other traditional, where people come in and they do a transaction. Those have either stayed high or increased, even though we have not had in-person hours at many of the buildings that provide those services. And so to us, it really speaks to, the use of some of the new ways of working have really been embraced by many of our customers, but we still want to have the options for in-person service as well. So, and speaking of those new services, like lessons learned during the pandemic. I think the temptation, I think, would be easy to fall back into the old normal way of doing things and lose sight of the tremendous creativity and flexibility and dedication that we discovered as a part of our response to COVID-19. One of the biggest things I think I've learned is that work and hours are not the same thing. A tremendous amount of work went on outside of the traditional work hours for a lot of people, and that at all levels of the organization. It's a little more complicated when someone is an hourly employee as opposed to a salary employee, but I just know people were working at all different times of the day during the weekends, to make sure that we maintain that high level of service, but also because people needed flexibility for their own lives. And that was something that was really important to us to try and provide because we wanted to, allow for, as I say below here, allow for better work-life balance. So we also discovered working remotely works very well for some positions, but not for all of them. And so we want to make sure that as we think about flexibility and remote work and like I said, a new normal, we want to make sure that it is done so in a way that is equitable across the organization and takes into account respect for the variation in the different types of jobs that people have. So we also place a lot more attention on and really in a very short period of time, either created or in most cases enhanced online services for increased availability. And like I said, they've really been embraced. We now have Permit Eyes, which is an online permitting service I think the fire department is using and DPLM is using, so people don't have to come in as often for an in-person permit. So these are just examples of things that have really kept those services going while we were not open to the public. One of the things we did discover was having that time, that time in the day where we weren't worried about interruptions or in-person transactions. We were able to be really highly productive and focused on processing the work that comes in, whether it's the online transactions that need to be processed or things in the drop boxes or what have you. We were highly productive during those times. We also were able to do some, staff meetings and things like that are very difficult to do when you're also trying to be, provide in-person services. It's hard to set that time aside to do that in what was the old normal during that work day. And the other thing is, we have the day-to-day services that we provide, but many departments have projects that they want to work on, whether it's implementing a new software system or, maybe a project that requires collaboration across different departments. Again, it's hard to do that project-based work when the public is coming in and out. And so this new normal, I think, allows for the best of both worlds. As I mentioned, the flexible work environment and having the opportunity for flexibility and the opportunity for remote work does allow for better work-life balance. It does reduce, peak time congestion and carbon emissions if people are working, maybe start the day earlier instead of the traditional 8 to 5. And it also helps reduce stress levels when people have a little bit more flexibility to manage whatever situations they may have at home, as long as it's equitable across the organization and it enables us to achieve goal number one, which is maintaining full service to the community. And when we talk about flexible schedules, there's two different kinds that we're looking at. There's routine, meaning someone may work a 7 to 3 when they were traditionally 8:30 to 4:30. Even though the department may not open to in-person till 9, they want to come in earlier. And as long as the department head can manage that scheduling to make sure that there are people, at the office to, not only manage the day-to-day work, but also provide that in-person service, we can have that flexibility. And this is something that we were talking about well before COVID-19 to really be competitive in the marketplace now to get, really to attract talent. I think there's now an expectation of workplace flexibility that, as a longtime municipal employee, I can tell you municipalities have been very slow to embrace, and this is kind of our opportunity to do that. And so then there's non-routine flexible schedules, which would include, say, today, for example, your school district says we're going to have earlier release and you don't have childcare coverage. Well, you could go home and still work from home remotely because of including meetings on Zoom and logging into our VPN network. I think, I don't know if you all remember, but at the beginning of the pandemic, we had very few laptops and very limited access to our VPN network. And now, not only with Office 365 and through CARES Act, we have greatly expanded the number of laptops we have deployed, and we can now work from home not only productively but also securely, which is a big deal. And a lot of people are productive late at night. They may have family issues, or they may be on Zoom meetings all day and just can't get to certain emails or things like that. And so we want to make sure people don't feel limited in that, and when they can be productive. So then the last part of this obviously is we're going to try this. We think that what we've learned about new ways of working, about the community's expectations and our ability to meet them. Like I said, we've gone to virtual meetings. We've got drop boxes outside where people can, on a Saturday morning, drop their tax payment off in the drop box or drop their electric bill off in the drop box, and it'll get posted on Monday. And we've been really effective in doing all of that. And so we don't want to lose this opportunity we have, because we've proven that we can do it. And so we want to make sure that we start off the new normal in a way that not only benefits employees and our customers, but also benefits the organization by being a more attractive place for people to work. And the one positive thing I will say about the flexibility that we now have by virtue of either technological flexibility or other types of flexibility is that we can adjust this in real time. You know, the SMT members, we've spent a lot of time talking about different ways to do this. They've talked to their employees about different ways to do it. And if we need to make changes to better serve the community or better meet employee needs, we do have the flexibility to do that. So we have our public info at Concord MA email address there. If folks who are watching this and have some thoughts on it, certainly send us your feedback on that, and we'll incorporate that as we go. So I talked about remote work, and I talked about how sometimes it works for some, but not all. And this isn't a hard and fast rule or an assignment, so to speak. It's just it's an illustration of what types of jobs work well from remote and what types are less so. Obviously, fully in person, public safety, public works, the line workers, mechanics, social workers, nurses, recreation staff who have programs, childcare, conservation. I mean, all those positions where the work happens either in a building or in the field with direct customer interaction, those have to be in person. And those departments understand the difference. And then there's mostly in person where, finance department is a good example of that, where they will still have, I think, a high number of in-person transactions, whether it's the treasurer, collector, or the clerk, or another department, or the town manager's office. There's still a community expectation for in-person service at offices like that. But there are days, say if we're not open to the public on a Friday, there are days that people in those departments can be very productive working remotely. And then you have partially in person, which is people who work mainly, on computers most of the time, don't interface with the public all that much, and do, help workflow for other departments, especially those that are more public facing. And even there, I don't think we're not really contemplating full remote work for people at this time, because I don't think there's an equitable way to do that. So we have the expectation that people will be in the office most of the time, but we also want to make sure that we have the flexibility for remote work when either operational or personnel needs either require it or allow it. So then I have the schedules here for the town departments. On the right-hand side, you'll see the pre-COVID hours. Some of them reflect summer hours that were in place before COVID. And I think what I just want to highlight is that the in-person hours represent somewhat of a reduction when you look at the regular business hours from the past, but the operating hours are still consistent and sometimes in some cases beyond what was scheduled prior to COVID. So as I said, in-person hours, these hours up here, if you can see in-person services from 9 to 3, Fridays will be closed to the public. And then Monday, the operating hours, there are people either on the road or in the office, meaning on the road, like our crews, or in the offices from 7 to 4:30 and on Friday, 7 to noon. And then I go through all the departments here, same thing. You've got the in-person hours that are reduced, operating hours that are longer than that. Not vastly different from prior. And like I said, I think the big thing, the reason why we think that we can do this successfully is because the in-person hours for a year or more than a year were, other than by appointment for most departments, were zero. And people still paid their light bills. People still did in-person services. And so we don't want to pretend like that didn't happen successfully. And so we want to make sure that we can get the benefits of a compressed in-person schedule, because we know that when it was no in-person services, those services still happened at a very high rate. So then finance, the same thing. Now at the end, the last slide is really the big finish. So I'm going to get to that. So unless people want to know about a particular schedule, these are all kind of following the same lines. We tried to make continuity between like Kais Road campus, public works and planning and land management are similar, I think largely the same for in-person. Townhouse, we wanted to keep the same for the departments. Town manager, we're calling it now the branch office. There are functions that moved over to Church Street in part because of townhouse renovations. What we've learned about those operations is that they're better kind of all in the same spot, especially for the deputy town manager who also oversees the council on aging, and being over by Harvey Wheeler has been a benefit. And the office spaces have worked out much better for especially facilities, but also our sustainability office and our public information officer. So those functions will remain at Church Street. Like the sustainability and Minuteman Media Network is really a lot of that's going to be driven by meeting schedules. We've talked a lot about our trying to get to a hybrid model of meeting and meeting rooms. So Minuteman Media Network, as you know, they work varied hours depending on what's happening with our meetings. So and then there are some agencies like Recreation and Council on Aging here that there's no difference between in-person and work hours, because when they're open for people who come in because they're program based, not a kind of a walk-in. It's people who go there for a specific program or a meeting, an appointment with a nurse or a social worker. So that's all the same for Harvey Wheeler. So then facilities, parks and playgrounds, there's a lot of stuff on this slide. I won't go through detail, but the point of this slide is to schedule it so members of the department can basically work extra for 9 days and have every other Friday off. And that's something that has been, seen as a tremendous benefit for especially people who are out working in very physical jobs to have that extra day of rest. But the hours that they put in are going to, it's still going to be 2 full weeks worth of work, but just in 9 days instead of 10. And again, I said as recreation, it's the hours that they're open, they're providing services either through childcare or camp programs, and then BD is on its own schedule as a separate, as basically as a health club. It has its own schedule, so everything is in person there. And then fire department, we just had for administrative business hours. Obviously, police and fire are 24/7. So I just have them kind of just to note that they're a part of the group, but their needs are obviously very unique as well. So now the big question, when? So most departments are ready to go. We've targeted June 14th, but townhouse renovations continue. And we just got word that the doors are like many things during this time. Post-pandemic, the doors are delayed for a few weeks, so and we can't open without the doors. So that's going to affect the timeline of that project. And so I think I understand completely that it's kind of confusing if people look at townhouse as kind of the pace setter for schedules, but until further notice, and that's why I do the all caps here. People should either call over or check the website for the hours for the departments they want to do business with, because each department, like you said, has developed a schedule that works for them. and Townhouse will remain closed for the renovations probably well into July. And, some of the departments, including like Knox Trail, where I sit right now, I could do a meeting by appointment, but if someone wanted to walk in, they couldn't get to the second floor if they needed an accommodation, because this building does not have an elevator. So there are some places where people who were working at the Townhouse went to and for temporary offices that aren't accessible. And so either we would need to make an appointment in a room that is accessible. And really that's how we'd have to do it, because so we really can't reopen those to the public for those reasons. So until those functions are back in Townhouse, people just need to either make an appointment or check the schedule for the building they want to go to. But right now, as we sit here, most of the other buildings that I showed will be ready for in-person service on June 14th.
Okay. Is that
I know I went through that really fast, but
okay,
it's
so
a lot.
you would like to take questions on this now before finishing the rest of your report? So Jane.
First of all, thank you, Stephen, and applause to the entire town staff, all of the town staff. I mean, the level of service that was maintained during COVID is phenomenal. And I wish everybody could take a huge break. But obviously that's not the way the town works, nor is it the way people are working. And I look forward to sort of seeing how the implementation of some flexibility maintains itself, or how that works. This is as much of a question as anything else. As we reopen, is there a backlog of, just as you referred to the backlog of doors, so that we don't have them in the Townhouse? Is there an anticipation of a backlog on permitting in other places where, in response to opening of trade, there will be now a much greater need for extended hours, for instance?
Based on and we've been talking about this for a couple of months, like the presentation you just saw has been months in the making with SMT. And like I said, they've been talking to their own divisions, and this is very much a bottom-up, schedule development. Jane, I don't think we have a backlog of work per se. I mean, there are certainly projects that didn't get done because of COVID response. And that's one of the reasons why being able to carve out some time during the workday for project-based work was something that was very appealing to us. But in terms of the normal day-to-day stuff, like I said, I think not only have we been able to keep pace, I think the community embraced the drop boxes and online payments in a way that they hadn't in the past, out of necessity, of course. But we feel like that a lot of people probably still will continue to avail themselves of those services, which will, I think, minimize the need for in-person. So if there weren't a lot of in-person hours really beyond the normal workday at any department. And this is something, but there weren't drop boxes, and the online stuff wasn't as developed as it is. So now people can pay whether it is through Dropbox or online, they can do a lot of those transactions on their own schedule versus on the town schedule.
Terry.
Super job by the manager and the whole SMT team in being proactive on this and being ready to open June 14th. I really like the goals in particular that I'm just going to state them again because they're really good. Maintaining full services to the public, retaining the lessons learned from the pandemic, and piloting new approaches. I think that's really good. You did mention, Stephen, that the hours are going to be posted on the doors, and I know you just flashed all those slides. I'm sure you're also going to post them on each department's page of the website, right? Because it would be a shame for somebody to go up and it wouldn't be open right then. Also, just
and I can't reinforce that enough. We'll do news and notices as well, but people really should check before they come, because it is something different now for each building. A little slight different, but the big one is most people are accustomed to coming to Townhouse for in-person services, and that's not going to be open. And we know that's going to be a little bit confusing. Like, why can I pay my electric bill at CMLP, but I can't pay my excise tax bill at the townhouse? And it's because of the renovations. And when we started that project, we didn't really know when the pandemic was going to end. And thank goodness it's ended, as quickly as it has. But it impacted the timeline of our project.
Right. So we would have had this issue even if we didn't have a pandemic. The townhouse would have been closed for a period. So there's a lot of congratulations in this report. The vaccine clinics, really good job. Thanks to everyone who participated in that. And thanks to the police department, certification and the Bike to School Award. So that's it on my comments.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from select board members?
Yeah. So I strongly support the idea of getting more flexible with work schedules. I think it could really help with retention and attraction of employees. And I think this is definitely the right time to act. I just had one concern, which is that, thinking of folks that are headed into work or coming home from work, in the most convenient times for them to do a walk-in transaction, it's not the middle of the day. It's, either the beginning or the end of the day. And so I just wondered, again, we want to emphasize virtual methods for most things and all, but there's just those occasions when, you do need to do something in person. Could we just have a day a week or something, or either move to the early side or to the late side so that option is available? Because middle of the day is, I think, the least convenient for the public of the walk-in times that you could have.
So we talked a lot about that, Matt, and it's an excellent point. I think, like I said, it's because the drop boxes have become so familiar to us now, between the election and the buildings being close to the public. It's easy to forget that they didn't exist in that form until the pandemic. And I think people can, like I said, if they need to see somebody at the end of the day, I think that's something they can make an appointment, and either do it by a virtual conference or by a telephone call. But when it comes time to actually pay the bill, they can do that either online or drop it off if they can't get there during the day. I'm told that at one time we did have late evening hours, and I know that there was some familiarity with that in other communities. And the feedback was that those hours really didn't get utilized by the public. And in anticipation of an even lower number of in-person transactions, we didn't feel like that was a great use of people's time, and building resource. But I will tell you that and really the big place to do that would be the townhouse anyway. And so when the townhouse reopens, if we get a lot of feedback that people want to have that option, and the drop boxes and online, methods aren't suitable, that's something we can talk about incorporating a townhouse, because that would really be the most likely place. So
yeah, I'm mostly thinking of the town clerk's office, where I think there are some face-to-face things you just can only do, face-to-face. And so most of the others, we have really good virtual options for. So
yeah, and I think one of the things, Matt, just to build on your point, the clerk's office really is the one that really has the broadest variety of in-person transactions. And there are certain things that you just either need to or want to do in person. The flexibility that we'll be able to have will enable us to shift hours just for the clerk's office. And once you see the renovations of Townhouse, you'll be able to see that with the lobby and everything else, it'll be other offices don't need to remain open because the clerk will have their own counter that people can go to. And so if it's a situation where the clerk's staff has to stay open late, but they can work remotely the next day, on a Friday or something like that to kind of balance out their week, we'll have the flexibility to do that based on the demands of the job, but not keep people there on like a Wednesday night to have one or two people come in, in the 4 hours that they're there. That's the big thing we want to avoid, because that's not, that time is generally considered not very productive. And so I think the flexibility we will have will enable us to do expanded hours for certain situations voter registration deadlines, things like that, the big ticket items that require that. So we certainly will be able, we will be able to do that. And I think we've proven that we have and will when it's needed.
Yeah, and I was really thinking about the commuter hours, not late night hours, or but also just maybe looking at the town clerk's office as a special case.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Stephen, did you have more for your town manager's report? No. Okay, good. Thank you for that. We'll move on to the chair's report. Just remind everyone that at 7:00 this evening will be a virtual forum for the middle school building project to talk about where they are, having just completed the feasibility stage of their work. So that's 7:00 tonight. Included in our package is a letter from the superintendent to the select board, where she thanked the entire community, including the select board, for the support that has been given to her and the entire school department during the past 14 months. In turn, I think we want to also be sure to indicate to her that we're indebted to her, as well as the entire school department, for what they've done to cope with the variety of things that have come down the pike, often on short notice. It's taken intentional collaboration, I think, between the schools and the town, and that began with a collaborative effort, an intentional collaborative effort between the town manager and the school superintendent, which then revealed itself in the extraordinary efforts of both town municipal employees and all of the school employees and the respective administrative teams and both of those aspects of our town government. As I said last week, we cannot say this enough, given all that our employees and our administrators have been through. And so I just want to acknowledge that and thank everybody on behalf of the select board for their part in that process. So that concludes my remarks as chair. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the grant of location petition by Comcast of Massachusetts to install new coaxial cable along and across 1150 Main Street and Baker Avenue. Do I hear a motion to open?
Linda, do you just want to remind people about town meeting on Sunday? Or
We certainly can do that now. I remind everyone that town meeting is Sunday, the 13th at the high school at 1:00. So hope to see everyone there. So I'm now ready to entertain a motion to open the public hearing for the grant of location for Comcast. Will the town clerk please call the roll? Okay, Susan, are you still here with us?
How about if I jump in here?
Okay, that would be great.
Move to open a public hearing to grant of location petition by Comcast of Massachusetts to install a new coaxial cable along and across 1150 Main Street and Baker Ave.
Okay, Jane, Susan is back, I see. Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous and the chair so declares. So I see Mr. Franks is here and I see Stephen Dokren is here. Stephen, would you like to introduce this or?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So Comcast applied for grant of location for the location that you described on Main Street. And we reviewed their petition, their plan, and we see no problems with it. We have a few conditions in a letter that we submitted to you. And if you choose to approve this petition, we ask that those conditions be made part of the approval.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Franks, did you want to make a comment representing Comcast?
Thank you very much for hearing our petition this afternoon. Not too much to add. It's aerial cable in this case, and it's to serve someone or the entire apartment complex at 50 Main Street in West Concord. So it's aerial cable in this case, and we have had a chance to review the conditions that Mr. Dukran referenced, and we have no objection.
Okay. Any comments or questions from select board members? Matt?
So I guess this is just for our own public works personnel more than for Comcast. But, you know, anytime we get one of these, I just think, well, was this an opportunity to put services underground? If so, did we evaluate that? And, you know, why are we adding more to aerial services when we have a town goal to go underground?
Stephen,
Yeah, that's a difficult thing to address at this point in time. If you look at what we did on Cambridge Turnpike, the opportunity there was to put all of the cables underground because there was a entire road project, a rebuilding of the street, and all of the utility companies came together, put money into the project, put in the duct bank, was a rather large duct bank, and that gave us that opportunity to do so. What Mr. Franks is proposing is, you know, a short run on existing poles, and we really have to look at when there are larger projects to roll things together to get it done.
Okay, thanks. I just, you know, wanted to say that it seems like the progress on this is just so slow. So if there's any opportunities, you know, we should just try to get creative whenever we can, I think, because it's been many, many years and we just making a snail's pace. It'll be centuries before we get it done at the pace we're going.
okay. Jane?
Following on Matt's question, because I agree fully that we need to prioritize underground or putting our utilities underground wherever possible. I'm curious, is Comcast the only provider of services to, I think this is Concord Green as a whole, or does the town also have its broadband infrastructure in place, and is that also aerial?
Stephen?
Yeah, I do not know. I'll have to check with the light plant on that. They did review the plan and they had no comments on the, you know, on the proposed Comcast line. But I believe everything out there is aerial, but I can double check on that for you.
The CMLP's it's a mix of underground and aerial for the town's broadband, and I know they don't service Concord Green, but I know Susan had her hand up about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's, we've been trying to facilitate, there's a subcommittee of the condo board that's been trying to facilitate getting broadband for the 220 units at Concord Green from the town. But right now, Comcast is our only option, unfortunately.
Okay.
That sounds like a bit of a bottleneck on everybody's. On everybody's. Is service good there, Susan?
Well, if you notice today, I've got dropped about 4 times already, and I'm sitting 10 feet from my router, and we're only 45 minutes into the meeting, so that's kind of been my experience.
Okay. Jerry?
So what service will be provided on this line? Is it just Comcast cable, or are there any other services?
Greg, you're on mute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. It could be any number of our services, but I think this is really just connecting the facilities, and then the individual customers will choose what they want, which could be any number of our services.
So if I read it right, it looks like it's for one customer, one house that you're going to be doing this?
I'm not sure.
It's an office condo, I believe.
Oh, okay. An office condo. All right. Is there anybody else who benefits besides Comcast in this office condo? Are there any other beneficiaries to this?
Is that a question to me?
I guess.
I don't know. Could you clarify? I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, I'm not sure either, but when you put up a line like this, I can see how Comcast benefits and how the office condo at 1150 Main Street, those tenants or owners benefit. Are there any other organizations that benefit from it?
Well, indirectly, of course, we have that PEG access fund. So more customers, more revenue, more PEG access funds.
That's a good point. But I think you're probably asking is if this additional line could be used to serve other properties. And I'm honestly not sure. I can't answer that.
Okay. And
My impression is that we serve most of that area on Main Street. I would be very surprised to find out that, other homes along that area don't have it. I think this is just an issue specific to the complex, but I'm kind of speculating there.
All right. And my final question, does Comcast pay the town any fee for utilizing the right-of-way to install this?
Well, this is all covered by our franchise agreement with the town, and yes, we pay franchise fees, and we pay 5% of our revenues quarterly to the town, and there's also a capital payment that we make to for PEG access, and then fees in connection with the application for this permit.
Well, maybe that's what I mean, because the franchise fees you're going to pay whether you install this line or not, but for the permit, I guess there's a separate fee that you pay to the town.
Yes.
And do you know how much that is?
I'm sure it's a nominal fee just to cover the town's expenses in processing it. I'm not sure, maybe $100 or something.
Yeah, that sounds like the number.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the select board? If not, I see a couple members from the public. Mark Howell. If you'll state your name and address, please.
Hi, Mark Howell, 668 Neck Hill Road. I figured I might as well comment since I happen to know 1150 Main Street is served by Concord Light Broadband. We, at least in the past, had some clients there. I know one particular business that ultimately relocated to the Damon Mill was a former customer there. So it is an office building which is already served by Concord Light Broadband.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Carlin?
Hi, thanks. Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. Two questions. First, I understand there was a site visit that was done on the property. What happened at the site visit? And the second thing is, what's going to happen with the cable line, the coaxial cable that's already on the poles? Those are the two questions I have. Thanks.
Are you referring to a site visit by which group?
By the engineering department and Comcast that I understand took place just very recently as part of this petition.
Okay.
I wasn't at the walkthrough, but it's generally just to confirm that the work, is properly represented on the plan and is properly described. And it's an opportunity for engineering to point out any issues that there might be that are specific to that area, and just to go over the usual conditions that are imposed.
Okay.
And then did the engineering department see any issues? I guess that's a Steve Dukran question. Thanks for the follow-up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll let Mr. Dukran answer.
Yeah, one of my staff attended the meeting, and we didn't see anything that that we needed to address by changing the routing or anything like that.
Okay, and then the second question was, what's going to happen with the line that's currently in place?
The line that's currently in place is being used, so it's going to stay there. But in the event that we encounter any defunct cable, anything that's not being used, we do remove it. So that it is an opportunity when we go up on the line to check our plant and make sure that it's clean.
Got it. Thanks very much. That's it for me.
Okay, Susan?
Yeah, just following up on that. So what does Comcast do if there are, I know that Concord Green totally has access to Comcast, but if the service is, as I've just described, and does that mean running a new line, or what's involved there?
And I'm not sure exactly what this customer needs. Maybe it's an Ethernet type of situation, and that's what the line is for, sort of a private network. I'm not exactly sure, but it's specific to an occupant there at that complex.
Okay. Pamela?
I know that
Pamela,
Comcast,
excuse me, could you just say your name and address?
Sorry. Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4, living in Concord Green. I know that Comcast, which I currently have, has underground cables. Why is this overhead? We're about to repave the entire community. And I would also like to know whether we can get access to the town broadband, since that's already in Concord Green's community. It's simply not, needs to be run to the individual buildings from the centers that are in the community. Because I want that too. So why is it overhead?
So we may not have the right people here today to answer that question. And I assume you've directed your questions to CMLP.
CMLP's answer is, and I go to CMLP board meetings, is we are not allowed to connect units through condominium areas without the condominium giving permission. And they said, how many people in Concord Green want it? And our board hasn't yet been willing to do such a survey.
Okay. All right. So
I don't, maybe Susan, you must know more than me about why Comcast is the only available in Concord Green.
I don't.
It doesn't make sense to me why that's so.
Me either. I don't know the answer though.
Okay. So it sounds like that needs further explanation. I'm going to return to what we're discussing here, which is the Comcast grant of location. Thank you, Pamela, for your questions. Sorry, we can't answer them all now.
But why is it overhead for this, since Concord Green is underground for Comcast?
I don't know what happens after it gets to the pole outside. If you've had a chance to look at the plan, it goes to utility pole 92. So it may indeed, hit a vault somewhere. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. But the hearing really here is only concerned with what happens on the public way, not what happens in your complex, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just check. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments from the public, and I'm not seeing any further from the select board. So I would entertain a motion.
Move to close the public hearing.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, that's unanimous and the chair so declares. Any further conversation from the select board? If not, I would entertain a motion from the clerk.
Move to approve the grant of location petition by Comcast of Massachusetts to install new coaxial cable along and across 1150 Main Street and Baker Ave.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, it's unanimous and the chair so declares. So thank you, Mr. Franks and Mr. Dokran for being with us today for this item.
Thank you so much.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is the Capital Planning Task Force final report and recommendations. And I see that we are fortunate enough to have Elise Woodward here with us, who's chaired the committee, as well as some other representatives who've been working on this committee. And we're about to hear more about this in detail, but let me just remind everybody that I believe it was in late 2019 when the select board approved the charge for this committee, with the hope that some more integrated fiscal policy between the schools and the town could be realized. And I think the committee has been at heart related to capital projects. And I think the committee certainly took this charge on with gusto. And despite COVID interruption, they persevered and were able to meet the timeline to submit the report by the end of this year. So thank you for doing that and welcome. And we look forward to your report.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to today. We submitted a PowerPoint in advance. I don't know if Jeremy or Stephen want to control the PowerPoint, or would you like me to share my screen?
What would you prefer, Elise? Whatever works best for you.
Either is fine with me.
So Jeremy, why don't you tee it up if you can?
Jeremy.
Sure. So 1 second.
Okay.
Thank you. Can everyone see it well enough?
We can.
Thank you. So the Capital Planning Task Force is pleased to submit this final report with the recommendations that were approved at our April 14th, 2021 meeting. And we look forward to a discussion with you as we conclude this presentation. So personally, it's been my pleasure to have been part of this energetic group. Several of the task force members are here today, and others may join us as we move along. Collectively, we want to express our sincere appreciation to the public for their participation and support of our work. We've tried hard to listen and to incorporate the best thinking and practices into these recommendations. And we sincerely thank the Select Board for giving us the opportunity to contribute to better understanding our town's capital planning process and to positioning it for the future. So the next slide is the agenda that I intend to discuss with you today. I plan to move rather quickly through the agenda, but if you'd like to interrupt as we go along, I'm happy to have you do that. So we'll talk a bit about context and then our recommendations. So for background, next slide, thank you. So as you know, the Select Board established the Capital Planning Task Force to develop a process for townwide capital planning to be used to develop a capital plan and a 10-year time horizon. And it was intended that this plan would be updated annually. The purpose was to identify a process for anticipating and funding very large projects, and that would incorporate all of these concepts. The charge was informed by input from the Finance Committee that was anticipating the potential for a number of large capital projects that would be expected to be funded by debt that would require approval by the town citizens at town meeting. So these would be override the Proposition 2.5 funding. But it was also informed by the fiscal planning recommendations of Envision Concord 2030, the comprehensive long-range plan that was completed in 2018. Next slide, please. A bit about our process. The task force was established, was charged in September of 2019. We met in person from November to March 2020 when our work was paused by the COVID pandemic requirements. In September 2020, the task force resumed regular meetings virtually by Zoom, and we met through May 2021 in order to fulfill the Select Board's charge. Our approach was considered and deliberative. We discussed options, best practices. We received public comment. We considered the advantages and disadvantages of options and the impact our recommendations would have on taxpayers. Next slide, please. This is some of the analysis of the work that we discussed. Confirming the authority of the town manager and the town charter for capital planning, reviewing best practices from Massachusetts Municipal Association and other towns. We considered at great length the advantages and disadvantages of a standing capital planning committee versus enhancing the existing process. We collected public comment and we considered three primary options, which are shown on the next slide. In an illegible chart. I'm sorry for the very small print. The several options that we evaluated included long-term capital planning process that would essentially maintain the current process or to have a process that would have enhanced commitments in the process. And then we considered the standing committee. Ultimately, the task force concluded that commitment on the part of leadership to proactively plan to meet future needs without encumbering the process with additional committees would deliver the desired results. So the process that we recommend will support Concord's sustainability principles, evaluate and coordinate projects to meet multiple objectives with each investment, while strengthening citizen access and input to the planning process. Next slide, please. So a bit about what we heard from citizens. The public input was very important to the work of the task force. Many residents attended our meetings and our public forum, offering many useful comments during our work. The commitment of these citizens, the commitment they've shown to our community, their genuine interest and knowledge and attention to detail has been remarkable and inspiring. We appreciate it very much. These are the range of comments that we heard from citizens. And I'd like to just say that many of the comments from citizens advocated for a new standing capital planning committee. And the task force considered this, as I said. However, we concluded that the essence of the challenge for capital planning in Concord is not the governance structure. The challenge is, and has been, to manage citizens' tax burdens for fiscal sustainability and to predictably balance meeting future needs while estimating debt over time. The task force determined that the authority and responsibility for these fiscal recommendations rests with the leadership of the town and the schools and requires focused input from the public. So to that end, these are our recommendations. Next slide, please. Specifically, we recommend, first, that a long-term capital planning process for very large projects be adopted by the select board and the school committee to incorporate these elements. The long-term capital plan that is updated on an annual basis for all projects with project evaluation criteria for each project, a specific project to create and update the long-term capital plan, and a specific timetable for presentation of the long-term capital plan in public forums to encourage input from citizens. Next slide. Our second recommendation is that a very large project, which in our report we refer to as a Tier 3 project, be defined as any project that exceeds a cost of $5 million or a project that has 2 or more phases totaling $5 million or more dollars. And I think it perhaps is obvious, but the dollars that we reference were considered to be 2020 dollars. Our third recommendation is that these recommendations be formally integrated into the current town and school policies and practices for capital planning to create a 10-year capital plan with debt capacity analysis. And that we would anticipate that the Finance Committee would be able to use this capital plan as they prepare their 5-year tax projections. Next slide. We also recommend that a debt template be designed to summarize and present future Tier 3 projects, very large projects, to assist in analyzing the impact on taxpayers and the potential sequencing of projects, and to update this annually. The report has some sample templates and shown in Appendix E. And we additionally recommend that annually the integrated town and school Tier 3 project list would be made available for citizen input at regular intervals. And that list would show priorities, climate criteria evaluation, project timing, likely timing, and debt sequencing. So in addition to these recommendations, the report includes details that are important to establish a predictable capital planning process. I'm going to show you a few of these, but they include specific commitment to integrated decision-making between the town and school leadership, evaluating and prioritizing projects, sequencing debt, the annual timeline that I mentioned, and a more visible and specific formally designed public process. And we have some suggestions for putting the recommendations into action in our report. This is a list of proposed project criteria. The task force highlighted the importance of objective criteria for evaluating projects and determining the appropriate sequence to meet the community's needs. Each Tier 3 project should be evaluated using project evaluation criteria such as these that include elements related to the financial impact to Concord, its residents and businesses, the potential to improve operational efficiencies and inclusion of stakeholders in the planning process. The criteria should also include elements related to climate change, vulnerability of capital assets, such as drinking water, wastewater systems, communications and utility systems, buildings and other structures. And so these particular criteria that we have included are linked to the Sustainable Concord Plan. We think that that is an important correlation. Next slide, please. This is a sample debt template. Again, I apologize for the very small print. Essentially, this is a critical aspect of the 10-year capital plan. It's the integration of priorities for capital improvements across all town and school departments. It's a systems approach in that respect. We anticipate that the long-term capital planning will be supported by debt capacity analysis to consider the maximum amount of spending necessary to meet the community needs while maintaining fiscal stability for citizens. Because capital planning is an iterative process, an annual update of the long-term capital plan should update project information from the previous year's plan and continue identifying non-building infrastructure as well as strategic land parcels and buildings for potential municipal purchase and use. So these sample projects that are included in our report show, if we could read it, we would see they show hypothetical upcoming projects included as illustrations. They show across the x-axis is fiscal years. So they show recommended sequence of projects, an indication of whether the criteria have been evaluated for the project, and the estimated total project cost, as well as the estimated annual cost of the debt service. So there are two primary templates that I'll call your attention to. One is the projected tax impact of the Tier 3 projects, and the second is the estimated debt service payments for Tier 3 projects. So as this is updated annually, it would be possible to adjust the sequence of the projects depending on the debt service estimates, et cetera. So this would be a critical tool for debt smoothing over time. We also included a recommendation that an interactive tax impact calculator would be included, available to citizens. So a citizen could use this interactive template to evaluate their individual tax changes with the anticipated debt sequence. Next slide, please. So a bit about the process timeline. The recommended process is intended to be a regular and predictable annual pattern with multiple opportunities for public input each year. It's intended to identify all potential projects from town, school, departments, as well as ideas from the public to be integrated with the annual budget process for clarity. And the task force recommends that these recommendations be immediately implemented or so that the process may begin in September. I think an important lesson learned from the 2003 facility planning effort to develop a long-term capital plan was that the process recommendations in that plan were not adopted. And while the individual projects of that plan were eventually completed, no process was put in place to ensure that the plan would be updated on a regular basis or that the projects would be sequenced in a predictable time frame. So instead, the planning for those capital projects, which were essentially the elementary schools and the high school, those projects continue with the respective town and school budget processes with no integrated planning together for those very large projects. So maybe I'll just highlight this a little bit. The process that we described would anticipate a joint meeting of the select board and the school committee to present the draft long-term capital plan for public comment in September. That draft plan would have been, between town meeting and September, would have been developed by the town and school leadership. Then after public comment from that initial joint meeting was received, in November, the town manager and school superintendent would present the long-term capital plan to the finance committee with a focus on the long-range impact to town finances and residents, again, for public comment. Finally, in December, there would be a joint meeting of the select board and the school committee to discuss and approve with public comment the revised long-term capital plan and then incorporate specific spending into the warrant. So these months are suggested, a suggested time frame. I think what is important is that that there be a sequence similar to this, whether it happens in September, November, and December, or other months, but that it be predictable, blended with the annual budget process, because the public expects to make comments for that process. And so it seems reasonable that the capital plan would be collecting comments as well. Next slide. So in summary, the recommendations of this task force are intended to establish a framework for systematic fiscal planning. Importantly, to strengthen the responsibility and leadership of the town and school for integrated financial planning, to meet multiple objectives with each investment, to maintain our high quality facilities, to improve the community sustainability, and to balance citizens' values and the tax burden. So as I said before, the members of the task force invite the select board and the school committee to discuss these recommendations and take public comment. After receiving public input, these recommendations or a modified version should be adopted formally and immediate steps taken to integrate the recommendations into town and school processes for capital planning in September of 2021. So in addition to a new middle school, other potential large projects may include development of the 2229 Main Street site, major work on the Public Works Complex, the Public Safety Complex, the Townhouse, and the West Concord Fire Station. The time frame for implementing these projects and others has not been determined, nor have they been scoped or estimated or cost estimated, but the needs appear to exist at the present time. In addition, there may be opportunities for land acquisition as envisioned in and aligned with the comprehensive long-range plan. So the task force suggests that by implementing and trialing these recommendations in the very next year, refinements may be identified and then implemented to continually improve the capital planning process for the next decade. So thank you. That concludes my comments. Thank you for receiving our report, and I look forward to discussing your comments.
Thank you, Elise. And again, thank you for all the work that's been done on this. Jane.
I agree, and that's a heroic task in front of us. And the greater task will be to future select boards and school committees and town departments to have the vision to keep plugging into the 10-year frame, so that we don't find ourselves in emergency situations where, all of a sudden we don't have the benefit of the planning that we're putting into place right now. The process. One question I had is the use of a P3 dynamic. We've seen this less in what we would call town capital projects, but I could imagine going forward, we've certainly seen the influence on capital projects, and I could imagine there may be more blending going forward. Where does that factor in?
It's a good question. I will make a comment about that and then ask if there are other members of the task force that would like to add to that. Most of our conversations about very large projects included projects that did not have a revenue stream for the town. So they were essentially municipal buildings, schools, for example, where there's not a separate revenue stream. So a P3 system there might very well be additional revenue that it would be a blended financing perhaps for the projects. So it would be from my standpoint, it would be a P3 project would be sequenced like any other project, just understanding the component of that would be debt excluded. Do other members of the task force have another thought about a P3?
At least this is Prasher. I would agree that the framework we've developed should be used for any type of project, regardless of the revenue side, because if it affects the cost of the town, it needs to be factored into the long-term plan. And as Elise said, you know, the costs that get factored in would be netted out presumably if there's a revenue coming in to the town. So you're looking at net cost for funding.
Susan.
Thank you. Yes, Elise and committee, thank you so much for all the work. I went through the plan and need to spend a lot more time to get the nuances of it, but I very much appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I have a question about projects. There are projects that I would characterize as capital creep projects that when you look at them over the length of the project, they might be a $5 million project, but it's, you know, $500,000 this year, $750 next year. And in addition, there may be some funding that comes from CPC, which of course is taxpayer funded, but it's not, it's a little different category. So I think it'll be particularly interesting in is that get set up initially, because the things I'm thinking of are White Pond and Giroux, which over the term of the whole cost of the projects are substantial, but they're what we see is incremental financing over a number of years. So I just wondered how those would be addressed. And I'm not sure, Elise, if you're the right person to ask or if that's more of a Stephen or a Carrie question.
Well, I guess I'm happy to offer comments, but I'll defer to Elise if she wants first bite at the apple.
All right, then I'll step in it first, Stephen. Susan and Select Board, we talked at great length about the Giroux project and the White Pond projects as for just this reason. And I think it's important to be clear that an annual a plan that is updated annually would allow the town better to capture these growing projects. So I might argue that they may be capital creep projects, but they creep because there's additional scope. And so as the capital creeps, as the scope changes, the costs increase. But by doing that, we may be able to meet additional community needs by adding scope to an existing project and having its costs go up. So I think that it's important to be, to consider this integrated process as helping us to define, to evaluate the components of the projects, and then to also monitor them on an annual basis and see whether, in fact, the project that we thought was going to be a simple, less than $2 million project really needs to be a $7 million project in order to meet the complexity of the needs that we're trying to achieve.
Thank you.
Stephen, you can redirect that if you like.
I really wish I'd gone first there. Okay. That was well said. So I guess I think to kind of bring it back into the context of the discussions of the task force, we talked a lot about the different types of projects. As Elise noted, and she did an amazing job as chair. Kind of keeping a wide-ranging discussion on focus and getting us to this presentation tonight. It was not easy, and she put a lot of time and energy into it. I want to commend her and the other task force members. But one of the things I think we talked about is, we want to make sure that we're doing good communication between the town and the schools, and making sure that we're listening to the community and doing that whole enhanced process well. So to the greatest extent possible, unforeseen circumstances can at least hopefully be discovered in conversation. But, this an enhanced process or a freestanding committee is never going to prevent capital projects that are needed because of a system failure or things that grow because of conditions that are discovered during the planning process or, those types of situations. And so all we really want to do is make sure that the community understands the pressures that are on a particular project, because it's not a siloed thing between one part of the house and the other. And so I think in terms of White and Giroux, because in White and Giroux, we kind of talked about as opportunistic projects. Like sometimes things just come up and the town and town meeting voters want to take an action that maybe doesn't have the level of due diligence that it could, which would tease out like how much is the project really. But I think what the process we have lays out is for projects that do have, longer gestation periods, you can do additional due diligence. And so you'll know before bringing them forward, if they are over 5 million over 2 phases, in that case, they would be a very large project. But like I said, a lot of this goes into the due diligence. And we want to avoid that too. I think the goal of the capital planning task force and the goal of the structure we're recommending is to mitigate those circumstances to the greatest extent possible. But I just want to be clear that there are, things do come up from time to time that maybe fall outside of that.
Elise, can I just add one other comment to Susan's question? So, Susan, I think, you're right. You correctly point out a potential risk, but that risk is inherent regardless of whether the threshold is 5 million, 10 million, or 1,500,000, right? If you notice, if you look at the other towns that we looked at, many of them actually have all capital projects as part of their plan. And so you can certainly eliminate that risk of scope creep because that initial opportunistic purchase would be included if the limit is low. But then it's a separate matter, I think, and having a separate, maybe not a separate process, but a separate challenge to manage the capital creep once the project started. And that's true regardless of whether it's this enhanced process for tier 3 projects that we're proposing or even tier 2 projects. That scope creep is always there. So hopefully that additional context helps. It's not due to the limit. It's just part and parcel of the risk, but they're two separate risks.
Right. And if I could just add, we did, as Elise said, discuss Giroux and White Pond for quite a while because of these reasons. And we specifically decided to include any project that was going to be over 5 million over several phases. So if you recall, when we purchased Giroux, they said the land will be this much, but then we're going to build things. So we could already tell there were going to be multiple phases. We didn't yet know what we were going to build, but that kind of project we could foresee in this new, if we had this new process and that kind of project came up again, it would maybe go on the list as being a potential that over several phases it might hit the 5 million. And in one of those slides, Elise was showing that you couldn't read very well. You can see a few projects where not much is known yet, but it would go on the template as something that is like a red flag, that we don't know a lot about it yet, but it could hit that 5 million over several phases.
Thank you. That's all very helpful, especially as you point out, seeing the how it plays out over a number of years, and what the incremental costs are expected to be, understanding that can change. But thank you for those responses.
Okay, Matt?
So thanks for this report. It's always eye-opening, of course, to look at even the kind of pro forma plan that's offered there just as a sample. It's, daunting what we have ahead of us. But when I think of the scope of this, one of the things that I wish there was some more prominent representation of, at least, was that a capital plan is not only spending on projects, but it also is potentially asset sales that lead to capital gains that can offset some of those costs. So a capital plan should include both elements, on both the pro and the con side, if you will, but realizing that, of course, municipalities are going to always spend more on capital than they're going to make on capital. So I don't know if there's any consideration that was paid to that in the past, or any place that maybe I overlooked that's represented in the plan.
I would say that's a missing piece. That's a plan.
I mean, when we look at the middle school, for example, people have brought up this whole idea of, well, we could sell something else and offset the costs, so
I guess it's a very important idea, Matt, and the task force did not consider that in a significant way. But obviously, you're correct. And so if we go down the path of the middle school example, the question would be whether selling that asset, the Peabody asset, would accrue to the middle school project, the school department in another way, or the town, or in what way would those assets be?
Yeah, and I was just thinking about the gross level, maybe not so much, burdening one project or another. It's really more of just what's the net impact, and is that something we're looking at as part of a holistic plan? The next is, I guess, having been the liaison to the Community Preservation Committee, I really am struck by just the level of vetting, the structured process, that goes on for what actually amounts to a relatively modest amount of capital spending for the town. It's really almost the smallest bucket of spending, and yet it's scrutinized to the nth degree. And I actually think that it's an excellent process. And I just, I don't know what the legal requirements are on, Community Preservation Act, standing of an individual committee versus, gosh, the scope that could be covered by such a group. But it just seems like, wow, there's the potential to just use that resource, to look at more broadly at our capital spending. Now, we do have projects that are so big that they have their own dedicated committee, like the middle school, but a lot of this process is more ad hoc. There maybe is a public hearing or something on like a Giroux or a few of them, but there's not like a continuous integrated plan that is managed in a public committee process yet. Yeah. So anyway, it's just, I realize that, we're just reviewing these plans more than making them, but it is still something to consider.
So I think it's that's all relevant input to the select board as you consider these recommendations and what process you will choose to put in place. It is true, the CPC process is quite specific. I think it's statutorily based, and we did receive citizen comments about the value of that process, and why couldn't we use a similar thing for this capital planning process? All true. Those projects are fully baked. The CPC projects are applications for work that is the design is done, the work is teed up. It's work that's intended to happen in the next fiscal year or spread over a couple of fiscal years. But those projects the details are known. Unlike a capital plan, a 10-year capital plan, where the details of the projects might not be known, the projects might be described to meet needs that were known, but the specifics of the project would not be known. So even with the middle school, yes, it would have appeared on this 10-year capital plan as a need way before the feasibility study was done, way before the conceptual design was done, way before the cost estimates were done. It would have been a a scope cost estimate, essentially, before the details of the project that will be flushed out by a building committee or another committee to really have specific considerations of the details.
Well, I mean, I would counter that the CPC occasionally will make contributions just to the Affordable Housing Fund with no specific project in mind. It's the funds that are available for potential future spending. And then a project like Warner Pond dredging, I don't think that the scope of that was clear at all when the first money went in. There was just a rough estimate of, well, what would it cost? And it's been clarified as time went by, but I don't know that it really is always fully baked. And then I think that while, of course, every town's going to have their own process and it's very hard to compare capital plans. I mean, it sounds like the committee did look at capital planning processes for other towns, and that's great. I also think from a benchmarking perspective, it was very illuminating in these recent discussions of the middle school project, for example, by the Finance Committee, to just compare the current debt position and tax impact on citizens, of spending, across peer towns. And so that, any element of a future capital plan, while it probably couldn't include forward-looking information from other towns on this basis, at least to get a sort of a benchmark of the current position in history would really be helpful.
Okay. You concluded with your comments, questions?
I'm all done, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Lower my hand.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So I'll just comment on a couple things in the interest of time here. One is that Matt referenced the inclusion of asset sale as part of the projection. And I did note in the report that you did speak about the need to pursue some of the land strategies, I guess, for all projects that are considered at this point in the future, as maybe in addition to those that maybe have not been labeled at this point. So, I think one of our specific items in our board goals this year was, again, remarking that there's a need for land management planning for the future, both with existing parcels in town as well as those that some of which were included in the Envision Concord in terms of aspirational that we might acquire that are outside of the existing parcels. So I was reminded of that with Matt's question, and I think that's an important thing that needs to be emphasized in the report. The other thing I would just comment on has to do with and Elise and the committee, you've done an excellent job, I think, of reminding all of us of the iterative process and the importance of updating this each year. And I might not be using the correct terminology here, but when the initial scope of the project, of a future project within the next 10 years goes on the template, did the committee have a chance to talk about how that is formulated and how that is viewed by the public over time? And where I'm going with this is that we've just seen an example where once a figure is put out in public, even when it's labeled estimate, people hold on to it as a fixed number. Right. And then when the town is looking at other opportunities to accomplish objectives that may impact that number, we've got a huge job on our hands to educate the public. So I'm wondering what if the committee had a chance to talk about that aspect of it and how you would advise the select board as we look at this template. Thank you.
So we did not talk about that in great detail, but other than to acknowledge that that would be forever an annual challenge. And it's human nature, I think, to latch on to the first figure that you heard about a project. And, even if you look at the history of the transportation improvement plan projects that the state holds, and they carry these projects for decades. And the TIP board will have these conversations about how can the rotary at the prison on Route 2 be so expensive? We thought it was going to be a $20 million project 20 years ago. So, I mean, I think that is, that will always be a challenge, but that is one of the critical reasons that this should be an iterative, annually reinforced project, because by putting the ideas for projects, the projects that would capture the needs of the community on the 10-year plan, they can be reviewed every year. And every year, in addition to whether the needs would be adjusted or not, the estimated costs would be adjusted. So, Linda, I really think it's a very tricky problem, and it's because that's a tricky problem, it's one of the deterrents to long-term capital planning, because groups will say, we can't deal with that education component. We just, it's too difficult. But I think fundamentally, the public is an informed group, and the public will understand if they're seeing the information each year and having the opportunity to comment on it. The public will understand better how these projects come to be, how they're scoped, what they cost, why they cost more. If you blend two projects into one project, the scope is different. You meet more needs, but yes, the price tag is greater. So other task force members may want to.
No, thank you for that. And just related, if I may, so what is the expertise of the town, and I'm using town broadly, needs at this point to come up with the scope of those projects when we say we need a new public safety complex within the next 10 years? What expertise and what do we rely on for scoping out those numbers, even if they will be informed by an iterative process?
I can speak to that. One of the things that we included in the report, I think it's an appendice, is a memo that I had prepared for the board, I think back right around the time that this committee got its charge, about kind of the priorities of like large scale capital. And this was before the capital planning task force really existed. If it would have been a perfect exercise to go through with this process. But we've relied into the TBA facilities assessment, and there needs to be every decade or so a comprehensive facilities assessment that looks at what are the conditions of the buildings, what are the needs, where are things going, and that's now it's still not finalized. And in fact, we just talked about today how much we got the draft report from TBA, and then a lot has changed. And so do we need to really take a step back on that and really look at what that report gives us? But the data on the condition of the buildings is all very good. And so that's what we rely on. And I think that the message that I heard anyway was the real call was for collaboration, not competition. Meaning a middle school going head to head with a public safety complex. We wanted to make sure that the town and the schools were working together to sequence. I guess the two words were, collaboration and sequencing were really my watchwords on this, and that's why the enhanced process really focuses on those 2 points, at least in my view. And the debt schedule allows you to plan for a relatively over time smooth level of debt. That's one of the objections, is to keep the debt on a consistent level. The town has policies about how much debt, how much debt issued capital spending we should have, how much debt we should be carrying. I mean, there's already these things that exist as guideposts for us to work within. It's then sequencing the projects within that sequence, that debt plan, so we stay on target with those, by and large, with those policies, and that does take collaboration between all departments. And so that's where I think, to your point, Linda, that's where that happens. Really, is to make sure that as we look at each big project, we look at the tax impact over time, not only the, and it's not even, I mean, one of the things that is a part of this, it's not less sale of assets, but retiring of existing debt. Retiring a debt service for, say, the elementary schools is like the sale of an asset, in that debt service money should continue to be obligated for debt service to keep that to make sure we comply with our policies, but also keep that level of debt service payment relatively consistent so we can keep making those investments. And so I think that was one of the goals. I think the report and the presentation kind of highlight that was one of the things we really strive for in sequencing the next 10 years.
Yeah, thank you. I understand the debt analysis and and our policies regarding carrying debt are important, but I think it's also coming up with the initial target amount for projects that go within the 10-year. That is a challenge.
Linda,
yeah.
If I could just say, I'm not sure that it's necessary that an exact number go in 10 years out. I think a range would work, or even a TPA. I think the most important thing is to get that project on the public's radar screen and the committee's radar screen. Oh, we might need a such and such building in the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, and in fact, do we speak to stabilization funding as part of the plan? I mean, following on from what Stephen was just saying, and we have, of course, occasionally made stabilization payments, but is it part of a full, a plan to kind of more level load our debt requirements over the future years?
Like many things, the answer is it depends. It depends on what debt is coming off the books. While the project is pending approval, it depends on how much the project is. If it's a $5 million one, and like I said, we were looking at really debt exclusion type level projects. And if it's a $5 million one and it stays within the parameters, you wouldn't necessarily need to set up stabilization funds. But a $100 million middle school does really call for stabilization to flatten that initial curve, or to try and round it down anyway a little bit. So, yeah.
I'm just speaking to the report's elements of a capital planning process. Do they consider, I didn't recall reading anything about debt stabilization payments as an aspect of the plan. And it seems like that should be a consideration in any long-term capital plan.
Oh, man, I think that we did not focus as a group on financing mechanisms. We focused on planning and process and making sure that the things that we heard from the community were addressed. Each project is going to have its own financing strategy. And so for us to kind of prescribe a financing strategy through the report didn't seem like what the community was really looking for. So I think you're right about that, but we didn't really focus on the financing because of the unique nature for each project.
Can I just add one other thing? I think, Steve, to build on your point, Matt, we focus on the process for developing the plan. And I remember at least one conversation where we agreed that Carrie and Steve and the staff of the town have done a pretty good job managing the debt, right? And taking proactive steps to manage the debt and bring down the debt payments. And so our focus is on the process with the sense that process is working well. But you'll notice that one of the recommendations when the annual plan is presented to FinCom every year, there's an explicit focus on long-term debt, et cetera. And I think the expectation, certainly on my part as the liaison from the FinCom, was as part of that conversation, we would take a look at that debt planning that we do every year, but then for the plan, we'd focus specifically on what sort of debt planning is occurring for the projects that are in the long-term plan.
Yeah, and I'm thinking less at a project level than just looking at the overall mountain that we have to climb over the next, 5 to 6 years, and just how can we start getting ahead of that and reduce the level of shock. And I can understand strategies with individual projects, but I would love that a plan would have that as an element, just like asset sales would be an element.
Well, and as I think as Elise said, Matt, our expectation and recommendation is to start the process after this annual planning meeting. And when we talked about this, the thought was the initial 10-year plan that comes out of the process would do exactly that. And you'd see that, and you saw some of the graphs, the ideal templates, and that presumably would start the conversation of what's coming for the next 10 years. And then that conversation would continue year after year. The notion was not simply to look at each of these individually, but to have that combined 10-year perspective, annual perspective.
Yeah, it's just like, having a year where it's 2 point something percent, and then there's a year down the road that's 7 point something percent. We want to try to avoid those kinds of ebbs and flows, right?
So
That's exactly right.
I appreciate this dialogue and all the good questions. In the interest of time, we've got a couple public comments, and I think I will take them. And there will be lots of opportunity for the select board to, once the final written report, I guess, comes into us, to work on this. So Diane, I think you've had your hand up for a long time.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to have it up for a long time. I thought
No, that's right.
Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. Thank you, Linda, for acknowledging my opportunity to speak. I really respect and admire the committee's work, and also the questions that Select Board have asked are really impressive and detailed and probing, and it's incredibly impressive. Nonetheless, I do not think that a standing advisory committee, which was the recommendation of the League of Women Voters, and I think the hope of the League, is an encumbrance on decision-making. I think it's a guarantee of citizen participation, not in the end result, but the process. And I think best citizen commentary occurs when citizens can observe the entire process and deliberations about how a particular project is going to be proposed and then developed and then funded. When things are presented in a kind of a whole, it is very difficult for citizens to gain access to and completely appreciate and understand the detailed background that has been taken into consideration that leads to a presentation. Stephen's wonderful phrase, collaboration. I mean, he's really good at this kind of commentary, and that's really important. And I think collaboration with the town citizenry is important. So I would urge us to reconsider having one of the options that the committee observed or considered, which is a standing advisory committee, which would just open up the process and allow the citizens to watch the process of the development. Thank you very much for taking that comment.
Thank you for that. Henry.
Myself, thank you. Henry Dane, 58 Everett Street. First, I want to say that one of the great joys that I will have when I become a member of the board in a couple of weeks, or maybe less time than that, would be fully supporting the recommendations of the Capital Planning Committee. I think that it's an extraordinary job that was done, and it's a wonderful model for the process that we should engage in dealing with the problems that are in front of us. And I don't think it deserves to be noodled to death. I think that if we have such a committee, the committee itself, with the kind of people that have been on it, will be able to resolve these problems. And much as I am reluctant to disagree with Diane, one of the values of it is that, in fact, you look at the whole picture. You don't look at the individual pieces, because if you look at the individual pieces, what happens is you're fighting the constituency groups for each one of the projects. And that is the pressure that the process is going to have to resist. And that is, everything is going to seem urgent to the people who are supporting it. And so if you get a more objective and distant project, a process that allows you to look at the overall debt picture, it's going to be much more effective. The collaboration point is important. The the beauty of it is that we will get the select board, the finance committee, and the school committee working together on coming up with numbers, not only for debt, but I would hope that as time goes on, that process also includes normal operating budgets for those entities. So thank you, Elise. I think you truly, if you did nothing else, you would truly deserve to be the honored citizen for doing this.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you so much.
Indeed.
Okay, Pamela Dritt?
Thank you. Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. I appreciate all your hard work. I know it's a very balancing act between transparency and inclusion and effectiveness and speed. But I think it's I agree with Diane. I think it's highly important that the community be involved. Look at the difference the middle school process made compared to the process for the high school. It was night and day better. And that was mainly because the structure of the process included the community at every step of the way. I greatly fear that what you'll do here without the standing committee will make it harder to do the kind of long-term plans that the community in actuality needs, because they will then focus only on specific projects, specific amounts of money, because they won't be included. And so please reconsider the idea of a committee.
Okay, thank you for your comments. All right, Elise, if I understood you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that you still had additional feedback that may impact the final report. Did I understand that? No, okay.
No.
Okay,
So
good.
the report that we sent on Friday is the final report. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the task force would be available to try to answer questions from the select board. But our expectation is that once the select board, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, that once the select board receives this report, that the work of the task force is completed.
Correct. No, that is correct. All right. Well, we are indebted to the incredible work that you and your committee have done on this report. And we thank you for taking the time to not only present, but to answer many of our questions today and respond to our comments. It was very helpful. So all of you deserve a well-earned respite. And we thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. We all appreciate it very much.
And as soon as town meeting is over, I'm sure this will be among the many items that the select board will turn their attention to. So thank you so much. Okay.
Linda, do we want to take a vote to accept the report, which I think is different from what we're going to do in the future, which is to adopt all or some or none of the recommendations, but do we want to at least vote to accept the report?
Yeah, we certainly don't always do that, but we certainly could do that. Would the clerk like to offer a motion?
Certainly, thank you. Yes, I move to accept the Capital Planning Task Force final report and recommendations.
With our gratitude.
With our gratitude.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
Myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you again, everyone. Right.
Hey, Linda?
Yes.
Before I know the next agenda item is the IMA, but our Chief Financial Officer, Terry LaFleur, has a scheduling conflict. Is there any way we could go to the next item regarding Monument Street, so you can present the financing.
I'm sorry, to move to
item number 8 instead of item number 7 to accommodate Kerry's schedule.
Okay.
Conflict.
I'm sure the select board is comfortable with that. So we'll move to Monument Street Culvert funding update as it relates to Article 9. Okay, Carrie?
Good evening. I'm Carrie LaFleur, the Chief Financial Officer. The item before you this evening really is an update to the FY21 budget line item budget adjustment article, which is Article 9 on Sunday's town meeting warrant. So you may recall that originally the only adjustment that we were proposing under Article 9 was for legal services, was moving $190,000 into legal services from general government and the finance department. Unfortunately, since that time, we've had some additional unanticipated expenditures come up, and because we still have the opportunity to present them to town meeting, we have pulled all of those together and would like to propose an adjusted motion under Article 9. The largest of the additional expenditures is the culvert failure at Sawmill Brook on Monument Street. And we are expecting this to be approximately $600,000. So that is significant. We have work, repair work that is undergoing. We've been able to make use of emergency spending procedures allowed under Mass General Law. But again, in total, we're expecting that to be about $600,000. There are a couple of additional adjustments as well due to some unanticipated or expenditures higher than what we anticipated. The second would be the Sudbury Road crossing improvements, that we do expect those improvements to exceed the original budget by about $150,000. We do have higher than anticipated workers' comp claims, and we're looking at about $85,000 higher than what was budgeted. And then the final adjustment has to do with cardboard recycling and disposal. As a result of the pandemic, people were ordering more things to be shipped into them, and our cardboard disposal expenses exceeded the budget. So in total, these additional adjustments are about $1,075,000 on top of the $190,000 in legal services. Fortunately, because of the pandemic, we've had position vacancies, prolonged closures, and then some CARES money that's been available to cover some of these expenses. So we do feel that we have the ability within the existing appropriation to shift money around to cover all of these expenses. And so we'd like to propose this to town meeting rather than use the year-end transfer process, because really the intention of Mass General Law that covers the year-end transfer process is to provide a process in the event you don't have the opportunity to go to town meeting. Where we have the opportunity to go to town meeting, it makes the most sense to do that, and we'd like to present these additional transfer requests to town meeting on Sunday. And in general, this additional money would come from public safety, about $546,000 from public safety. And the reason that we have money there really is the bulk of our CARES funding is going to cover public safety expenses. So fortunately, we have that available. We also would use or propose to use the full reserve fund of $225,000 to help fund these expenses. And then the remaining amount would come from our group insurance account, about $85,000 from group insurance. So that's what we're looking to present to town meeting. Unfortunately, all of these things kind of hit us just within the last several weeks, but we've finally been able to come up with what we believe are firm estimated costs for these particular items.
Yeah, if I could just add, we were talking about going to the Finance Committee for reserve fund requests for a couple of these items, and I think in talking to, communicating with the state and looking at the purpose of the act, as Carrie just mentioned, it really is better to have town meeting vote on all of it versus splitting it, some for town meeting, some for Finance Committee, which is why we kind of bundled them all together.
Linda, I have a
Yes.
couple of questions.
Yes, Terry.
For the cardboard disposal, because that's due to the pandemic, would there be ARPA or other payers or some kind of reimbursement for that?
So I can tell you we did submit those expenses to CARES and they were rejected. We are going to try again because that was something that we submitted early on and perhaps there wasn't a complete understanding of the individual at the state that reviewed that. So we are in the process of trying a second time, but it was rejected the first time around.
Okay.
The ARPA funds likely would be a funding source if we needed them, but I think we feel that we probably have some higher priorities for the ARPA funding.
Okay. And my other question is, you mentioned that in addition to the legal expenses, the total of these items is $1,075,000. And the source of funding, I feel like I missed something. I wrote down public safety was 546, reserve fund is 225, and group insurance is 85. And that's falling a couple $100,000 short of the 1,075,000. So I feel like I'm missing something there.
The reserve fund.
Yeah, 225.
Yeah, okay.
Group insurance was 85, and public safety is 546.
I thought the reserve fund was 250.
Sorry, the reserve fund is 225. So I think the pieces that you're missing are general government is 40,000 and finance is 150,000.
Oh, maybe your total 1,075,000 that includes the original legal. Is that right?
Let me just do a quick add.
Okay.
Yes, the 1.075 includes the legal.
Oh, okay, that was my mistake. Okay. So I guess my question is, this could get confusing at town meeting. Will there be some way to do a handout or something? I know it's really difficult with the pandemic to do handouts.
Yeah, we can look at that. I mean, I have a spreadsheet that has a lot of information on it. We can look at doing something a little more simple.
Or would perhaps the town moderator allow some additional material on the website under Article 9?
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, we'll do both.
Yeah, both. Great, thank you.
Matt?
So these are all FY21 expenses.
That's correct.
And then the other is, I don't know, it's a trivial comment, but I thought we made money off of cardboard recycling, that it was the one category of recycling that actually, was at least cost neutral. Isn't it good news that we have more cardboard to recycle?
No, we pay per ton, and the markets are upside down on that now.
It's so funny because, I mean, lumber is really expensive. I mean, all of the, paper products are up. So it seems really odd. Okay. It's just this is going to be, I think, something that's going to have to be explained at town meeting. I was hopeful of this part going smoothly. It's just going to be one more thing.
Well, unfortunately, the timing of things are such that, if we had known about Monument Street, if that had failed in December, it would be a part of the capital plan article. As probably either pay-go or even a debt capital project. We just didn't know until a week or so ago that it was going to be that much money. And then once we had to kind of go and basically look at a different motion, then we decided to lump in some of the other ones instead of going to finance. Like the Sudbury Road bids came back high. We spent a couple of weeks trying to chase some grant funding for that instead, and we were not successful in doing that. So it's really, these things are here because of timing, not because of a lack of foresight. They were all somewhat unexpected.
And there's no impact on free cash.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you for that, Carrie. I think we better move on. We're really up against the 7 o'clock forum, and I know a lot of people want to get to that forum. So the next item is the intermunicipal agreement for the Making the Connections Transportation Program with Sudbury. And I'm wondering who's here to speak to that.
Marcia is here for that one.
Okay, hi, Marcia. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management for the town. I prepared a memo. This should be really quick because we've been in conversation about this project for a couple of years. Sudbury was awarded a grant to create this Making the Connections. COVID came along, made it challenging for us to continue. Concord didn't really have funds directly related to this program. However, there is a small amount of funds available through the grant that Sudbury received. In addition, the town of Concord received just received $7,800 that would allow us to begin offering residents who need transportation to provide a stipend to people who are income qualified. And this program is to identify how we're using our funds, who is being served, and being able to report back to the two grant agencies. One is MAPC, I think, and the other is the state, Mass DOT. So looking at this opportunity is kind of last minute. We have to have signed on to the intermunicipal agreement by June 14th if we want to participate. But it would allow us to be looking at our program through the lens of multiple communities and providing this information in a cohesive fashion. And I'll entertain questions. I think I've provided you with a copy of the IMA. Within that is a project scope of what is being proposed in the IMA. We were late to the table because we didn't have funds identified, but now that we do, this is a great opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. I see, Jane, you have a question?
Well, and I'm looking again at the memo, just trying to figure out, and I may be asking a question that's sitting right there, staring at me in the words. What other communities are involved, and are we simply jumping in so that we can get our name on and expand over to, with the expectation that this is going to grow as an effort over time?
I don't know which other communities have signed on. There were multiple communities identified, including Wayland, Maynard, Stowe, and some of the other communities that don't have services currently available to their residents. The advantage is to be providing continuous, consistent information and having all of that information evaluated. So we have a project manager that will be hired that's through Nelson Nygaard. And then we can look at this as program as a possible future of where we dedicate funds and resources for transportation services. As you might recall, we've been working on a number of different fronts, trying to expand transportation resources in the community. And our grant funding keeps getting pulled back or lost. So we're trying to take advantage of these opportunities that come along and be part of a larger group as we work to identify transit, identify taxi needs and resources, and identify what we can do for populations at risk and at need.
And please understand that I am more than enthusiastic about all of our efforts to work on especially intermunicipal and local transportation needs. And as a long-term resident of Main Street in Concord, this feels like a Route 62. It's like a perfect Route 62 transit option, just in the names of some of the certainly Stowe and Maynard, maybe not so much Wayland. So I'm excited about this. I just was curious about where it goes from here, and obviously I'll just have to watch that.
Any other comments or questions from select board members? Terry.
I too am very enthusiastic. I think, Marcia, you and I talked about this maybe 2 years ago, so I'm really pleased to see this. I just have some questions. I'm having trouble just putting pieces together. So exactly what service does Concord get? It's a stipend?
We get a small, the $20,000 will be split between those communities that sign on minus Sudbury. Sudbury has identified as an alternative source of funds to fund this service. There will be a project manager who will oversee the data that is collected and put it together into a report. And then there'll be a small amount of money available for advertising. It will be part of a program. As I mentioned, we received a separate taxi grant funding so that we will be able to provide the stipend directly to people in need. And that will include our, people with disabilities, financially vulnerable residents, and veterans who are in need of either health services, community resource, or economic opportunities. It's not going to go very far, but it will get us started and give us an opportunity to find out what is the extent of the need in the community and look at it as a resource across multiple communities.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, so people who qualify and need that stipend for a ride will be able to take advantage, apply and take advantage of and be able to get to their medical appointment or whatever. That's the service that's being provided, right? Is that right?
It will be. We haven't yet implemented this program.
Right. I'm just trying to understand what it's all about. Okay. And who is our representative going to be on the steering committee?
I've been attending the meetings regularly. Our community services coordinator, Bonnie Wilbur, is going to be the person who will be distributing the funds and making sure that people get the connections that they need.
Okay. And finally, I don't know if this is a typo or I just don't understand it, but in Exhibit A on page 9, it lists all these towns and Concord wasn't listed. Is that a mistake or is it supposed to be that we're not on that page?
I don't have the IMA in front of me, so I'm sorry, I don't have that information. Concord was part of the group of communities that were interested in participating in this program to begin with 2 years ago. The conversation, as I said, has been ongoing. I don't know which communities have finally agreed to sign on, and I don't know where they are with that process. As I said, we have to sign on by June 14th, or otherwise they're moving forward without us.
Right.
Terry, if I may interrupt, I too noticed on page, and I wasn't sure if we were entering post this agreement or in time for the agreement, but it looked like we were being asked to enter in time for the agreement. And on page 9, and you can look at this later as well, every town is listed except us. And yet when you look at who's going to get the information, who should be the receiver of the information, the town manager of every town is listed, including Concord, but we're the only town missing in the actual agreement. So
that's a typo.
yeah, that needs to be looked at, I think. And the other thing I noticed related to that is that it had to be submitted by a date that's already passed. And so that date may need to be modified in the agreement itself.
Yes.
Sorry, Terry, for interrupting, but I just wanted to back you up on that. Yeah. Okay. Right. Otherwise, my comments notwithstanding, I mean, I think this is terrific in the direction of what we've been trying to accomplish here in terms of exploring at least another transportation mode and meeting a need in town. Okay. So do you need a vote from us, I think, to accept this agreement?
I need the select board to vote in the affirmative to execute the IMA.
Yeah, good.
Move to execute the intermunicipal agreement and participate in the Making of the Connections initiative.
Second.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, that's unanimous, and the chair so declares. Thank you for your work on this, Marcia.
Thank you so much.
And others as well. Yeah. Okay. So the next item is the discussion of Article 7 and the citizen amendment and any select board actions that we may want to take before town meeting. So as you know, we attempted to discuss this earlier, but earlier personnel board meeting did not occur, and then a subsequent one was held this last week. And we had, after the first scheduled personnel board meeting, we had scheduled an extra Friday morning select board meeting to follow up on that personnel board meeting. But since it didn't officially meet, we canceled that as well. So now I guess we're being asked, or I am asking the select board whether or not we are ready taking into account both where, and I should first say this personnel board, as you well know, decided not to support Article 7. But they did not take a position on the citizens amendment petition. Okay, so Susan, yeah.
I would just wanted to add that they are trying to convene a meeting on Friday. I haven't heard yet whether or not that's going to happen.
The personnel board?
Personnel board, yes.
Okay, that's good to know. Jane?
I just wanted to, I've been fairly consistent in encouraging us to follow the process that has gone on with other committees that needed to look at their own architecture and membership, and suggest that before we look at the motion, that we certainly from my perspective, I'm not interested in redesigning a committee after the fact, after we've disbanded it. So that may be some of the intent of the motion, but I think formally, I just wanted to state my disagreement with the article itself before we move any further.
Okay. Matt.
So has the moderator ruled whether the proposed amendment is in scope of the article?
Yes.
Yes.
The answer is yes?
Yeah, the answer, yes.
Yes, I think she has ruled it to be in scope. That's what I heard at the personnel board meeting.
Yes.
There.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, isn't it the case that regardless of whether or not the personnel board moves to move their article, it's on the warrant, it's in the warrant, so.
Right, it could be moved on the floor. It's just that if it's not in scope, it couldn't be, but it sounds like it's in scope.
Any other comments? So is, we do have the representative from Citizens Petition, but we have also read the material that from that amendment. We've seen that. Does anyone need further discussion or clarification of what's in that amendment? Okay. So at our, where it stands right now is that the select board has deferred taking a position, previously deferred taking a position on Article 7. And I guess the question I'm asking this evening does the select board want to proceed with taking a position on Article 7?
I just heard, I think from Susan, that there's another meeting of the personnel board that's being organized.
Yeah, and that would be to discuss the amendment. And
yeah.
So the question,
I mean, so it seems like we should perhaps rule on, right before the meeting, we could huddle before town meeting, declare a select board meeting then, and take a position at that time.
But don't we need two votes, one on the article and one on the amendment, or two decisions?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds like we do have from the personnel board that they have decided that they're not going to move the article. So,
Right.
I mean, I think that we could suggest that the article as written, that we take no action.
Right.
Or we could, have the motion be, to support it, but then vote it down. It sounds like it would tend to be what I'd expect to happen. But I don't know if that really adds anything to the discussion at this point. I think that, what's more useful would be to hear about what happens if there's another personnel board meeting.
Right.
Matt, I think both things have to happen. And for the purposes of this meeting, the first thing we need to think about is just taking the formal position, no action or action or support for the article as in the warrant. And then we can move on to either delaying our conversation about the motion or having it tonight.
Fine with me.
Right.
Okay.
So
It sounds like we're ready to take a position on Article 7. Okay.
I'm going to use the traditional wording and move to recommend affirmative action on Article 7.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Nay.
Ms. Ackerman?
Nay.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Nay.
Mr. Johnson?
Nay.
Myself, Ms. Bates, nay.
Okay. So that's unanimous and the chair so declares. Okay. And that will be communicated to the town moderator. Okay. And so I've heard Matt's discussion about, and since we have new information about some of us have new information about the personnel board trying to meet on Friday. Do people want, it sounds like there was some indication that we might wait till town meeting.
I would support that.
Okay.
I would appreciate hearing from the sponsors of the motion now as we have a select board meeting. We can always delay a vote until town meeting, but
yeah,
it's our option.
Yes. Okay. I think there's general agreement for that. So who would like to represent this?
Lyndon at Perry, 362 Bedford Street.
Thank you, Ned. Before you start, I noticed that in the packet of material that was, or the letter that was included in our packet today, you indicate representing a group of citizens. Are you able to identify for the committee who those citizens are?
I think it's a broad range of citizens, some of whom are employed by the town, and I think it's better that I just represent that it is a group of citizens within the town.
Okay, thank you. So please proceed.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. As the select board expressed your concerns as to whether the personnel board's warrant articles was ready to move forward this year, it seemed to our group that the progress could be made by an independent citizen study committee reviewing the select board's charge to the personnel board, the personnel bylaw, and the related documents over the next 6 months, if the select board would appoint such a committee. As you know, in the town meeting book, the League of Women Voters materials supports the appointment of such a committee. They say we recommend a further study of the article by an independent citizens committee, unquote. Knowing that the town personnel department is quite busy trying to fill recently vacated positions and handle the transition of employees back into town offices, it would seem appropriate to have the select board appoint this committee with an independent staff, would be our hope. If this afternoon the select board makes a commitment to appoint such a committee after town meeting, our group will make a commitment not to make a motion at town meeting under Article 7, unless a citizen tries to move Article 7 as written in the warrant. I'd be glad to answer questions. I hope that's clear. Thank you for this opportunity to present our feelings about Article 7.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay. I guess I would then ask, does this move select board members to change their mind about waiting for a decision at town meeting?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I was at the personnel board meeting, and I don't understand why you're going to meet again. They already discussed this. Do we know what's new that they're going to discuss?
They didn't take a position on the amendment.
Right.
That's the only item on the agenda, as far as I know. I haven't seen an agenda, but that was the expectation, since they already just voted on or made a recommendation on Article 7 of no action.
So they weren't ready to take a position last week, but they might be ready by this Friday to take a position.
I think they're interested in just hearing what the select board has to say, and they may end up,
Susan, you're on mute. Yeah.
I'm not sure what, I don't know. That's all I know is that I got an email saying they were trying to put together a meeting for Friday. Amy is on the call, so she may have an idea if there's anything else that was that they wanted to discuss.
No, that's all that I've been advised. I'm not sure that they will be able to have a quorum either on Friday or at town meeting. It's a 5-member board, and we've only had 3 seats that have filled, and 1 member has a work commitment that is very significant, that is making it difficult to have these meetings. So I think that they're just trying to do the best they can to gather and take action when it's their ability to do that has been limited in this time frame.
Well, I think that would almost speak to the importance of this motion to help. We clearly have a committee that is, despite the best intents of its current members, is hamstrung.
But again, I'll just point out that's because we don't have all the seats filled. So
right, I understand that.
It would be very different if they had 5 members, but.
Yeah, I guess that's my main question is the merits of staffing up the personnel board and addressing these issues versus seating a different new committee that, which would run in parallel to an existing standing town committee that we can't even fill all the seats for. That to me is just, it's a little bit paradoxical.
Susan, you had your hand up? You're on mute. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. And if I guess part of me is thinking if there are a substantial group of citizens who are interested in the personnel board, I'm sure we'd like to see green cards for them. I mean, it sounds like there's more citizens involved in this group than there are on the personnel board. And we've tried for years to fill vacancies and to no avail.
Terry?
I think that this is a very central point that we've hit on here, and the hour is late, so we can't really discuss now, but what I think is happening is that because the personnel board functions are not understood and confusing to the average citizen and other things that I don't want to go into right now. This is why we're having trouble getting the personnel board staffed. And I don't think we're going to easily get it fully staffed. But I think Susan's making a good point. There are a lot of people interested in personnel. So I think that a really good discussion is needed between the select board and the personnel board. And I feel it's really unfortunate we did not take the time this year to have that discussion, but this is the central point. Why have we for years not been able to staff this committee? It's really very relevant to the problems. And we can't solve that before town meeting.
Okay.
So one question I have is, sometimes you have a group of citizens who are willing to conduct an ad hoc, short-term, very specific mission, but would be less likely willing to sign on to a personnel, a board for a longer-term commitment. And I'm speculating that may be somewhere in the midst of this, but I think, Terry, you brought up some really good points about it's likely the very muddy nature of understanding what the personnel board is doing right now and what its long-term expectations are that would make it almost impossible to recruit members for. So somewhere in the ad hoc committee of citizens and the current process lies our solution. If it doesn't happen tonight or at town meeting, unfortunately, I won't be a part of that.
Yeah, somewhere between the personnel committee and the select board, I think working out the solution. Yeah. So the time for we got two comments here. Ned?
Just to say that the moderator is on board with this approach of having a study committee. As you will recall, in 2017, Mr. Phillips was bringing forward a motion, and Tom Tarpey from the FinCom recommended a study committee, which the study committee went off and worked for 6 months and came back with a much better, clearer approach to the housing article. A couple of years later, the same thing happened with the environmental group. So the select board has done this in the past. If you go onto the green card system on the town website, you might be interested to know that there are no seats presently listed for the personnel board. And that's been the case for a while, despite green cards being in the system. So I think the thing is broken, and our citizens group really would encourage select board to support our concept here and keep Article 7 out of town meeting through the appointment of agreement to appoint such a committee, it looks like Article 9 is going to be much more complicated than you initially thought. And if you want to help the moderator here, one way to do it would be simplify Article 7. Thank you.
Okay. Susan?
I think the moderator ruled on whether the article was within the scope of the original Article 7, which I think is different than direct support for the article. And I think the other way to keep it off the floor of town meeting would be not to move the amendment and give the select board and the personnel board time to work it out, because I think that there are, I'm not sure what an ad hoc committee would add. I think there has to be a conversation between select board and the existing personnel board and the town manager and human resources director to start to grapple with this.
Diane?
Yes, I'll be very brief. Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. Once again, a very thoughtful discussion, and thank you all so very much. I think that the word I should have used when I was addressing the last issue is independence. An independent committee that looks at things rather than a committee that is bound by already existing parameters or definitions. And what such a committee as Ned and his team have examined is an opportunity for somebody independent of the town, independent of the personnel board, independent of the great oversight of Amy, but her knowledge, to stand back and just look at this issue and make some very detailed recommendations. Study and make recommendations, then stand back and let the select board, let the personnel board, which one hopes is fully formed by that time, think about it. And I think empowering such a group, allows for a really good discourse. I mean, if it's a good group, they're going to bring in Amy, they're going to bring in Stephen, they're going to bring in, people on the personnel board, and Susan, they're going to do that because that's what good governance does. It listens to many voices. And so I would really urge us to, and urge you to support what you're doing, what Ned has suggested very much. And it's all about independence, isn't it? It's all about being able to kind of stand apart and make a set to look at something with a broader perspective and evaluation. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional thoughts here? All right. Before I suggest the next move, are people feeling, having heard some other additional comments and coming in with your own positions, are people feeling the need to take a position before our meeting at the select board, our meeting of the select board at the town meeting? Jane?
Well, I think that the two words I heard, which, resonate, are independence, which is true. We have a history of assigning quandaries to independent groups to take a look at, and two, a concern about a compact agenda for the town meeting and the potential for something to mushroom there. So those would be the two reasons to consider our taking a position tonight. But as the outgoing member, I would, this is going to land in the 4 plus plus our friend, I don't see, are you still here? Henry's lap. So I really want to make sure that you're all comfortable with the direction. The opportunity is certainly here tonight to circumvent town meeting with this idea.
Yes. Terry.
I think I agree with Jane. I think originally I was thinking about waiting for town meeting. And I was also listening really carefully to what Susan said about having the select board and the personnel board meet and try to work it out. So I think that is needed. But then as I imagine that, how long that might take and how we may not get anywhere. And I'm thinking, okay, I think I am now supporting, let's have an independent group, take a broad look at it, as Diane put it, and get it off the town meeting floor where it's just going to take up a lot of time and emotion. And we can basically just agree now to where I think it's going to end up anyway. It looks to me like it's going to end up as an independent citizen group. So why don't we just state our position now?
So as it reads now, and I'm going to read it as written by this written by the citizens group, which Ned Perry is representing, and which he stated that if we accepted in concept and probably detail of concept, that he would then not move his group would not move at the town meeting. So I'm going to read this. The select board shall appoint and charge an independent citizen committee to study the personnel bylaw, the charge of the personnel board, and related documents, and make recommendations for appropriate changes thereto. It will be subject to the open meeting law and shall hold one or more public hearings, including meetings with affected employees, to allow for notice and input prior to submitting bylaw revisions for consideration at a future town meeting. The select board will determine the number and qualifications of the study committee, its precise charge, and schedule when it shall report on its progress. Okay. So I'm going to ask the clerk to move that we would accept that responsibility.
Move that select board support the amendment to Article 7 as presented.
As a task that the select board will take on.
As a task that the select board will take on.
Yeah.
So, okay, but just discussion here.
Yep.
I'm really confused because I thought that the idea was in lieu of having an amendment to Article 7 that we would be charging all of this, and then the citizens would not move this amended article.
Right.
Right.
So what I thought I just heard was that, I don't know, we would support the amended article, but really there would be no article, No,
that we would take on this task as defined by this wording. And the reading I read that wording was because the petitioners said that as long as we took on the concept in detail, that they would not move at the town meeting.
Yeah, I guess I prefer that they bring it and move it personally. Because really, I mean, the other examples that were cited were not for, a town charter-based committee. And it does sound like there have been issues, there's serious issues with, if we're not filling green card positions, I really want to know more about why we're not doing that. But then also that, we do try to fix processes with strike forces, if you will, when things are broken. And I do agree, this has been broken much longer than it should have been. And it's really sad how little progress has been made. And so I understand and appreciate the impatience that people feel and that we should get right on it. But to kind of be threatened to do something, well, I'd say, I don't know, I don't really consider it a threat. I just want to know what the will of the public is that attends town meeting. And if they wish for us to do this, let's do it.
Any other comments? And if we don't take this on, and it failed at town meeting,
then I think it's the will of the public that we still have a problem here, right? Either way, we've got a problem. It's just the process to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And so do we bolster the personnel board and get that fixed? Where we have a personnel board that today can't even make a quorum for its meetings. We clearly need to solve these problems, and they're not getting solved. So got to get on it.
I would also suggest that we look at the green card, like the lack of apparently visible open seats and the backlog of green cards available separately, because if it exists here, I would be concerned it might exist other places, and that let's just put that as something that's housekeeping we need to get on top of.
Well, I suspect the personnel board had the assumption that they were going to reduce their membership to 3. And so therefore, filling positions was probably not a high priority. But seeing that Article 7 is not going to be moved as written, we probably should be filling those positions.
Well, I would just suggest that it's not up to a committee to decide not to fill positions in advance of a article. So I would hope that's not.
Yeah, it's just probably hard to recruit people when you're going to go out of business in effect.
But I mean, as somebody who was the liaison to the personnel board a couple of years ago, there have been problems with the seats for a while. So I don't know that this is specific to this year. And Susan, you know this as well.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is, let's make sure that this is an anomaly to our town committees and our green cards, not, a hole that we just discovered. And, then we go back to the discussion. Are we going to are we going to leave this up to town meeting to decide on, or is the select board going to take a position to take it on now? With the knowledge that if town meeting doesn't move the motion, there's still a problem and it's still going to need to be addressed.
And we could still seat a task force. It's still in our power.
I think it's clear that there's work to be done. What I'm not convinced of is that the proposed amendment is the way to go about it. And I do feel pushed into a corner because of the whole timing of it.
Anyway, I guess we do have a motion on the floor, but I wondered if it needed to be restated, but.
Right, there was some confusion about that motion. Linda, can you read it again?
Or Susan.
Or Susan, right.
Let's see, it's a fairly long. Move that the select board shall appoint and charge an independent citizen committee to study the personnel bylaw, the charge of the personnel board, and related documents, and make recommendations for appropriate changes thereto.
Okay, and that's the extent of the motion.
Well, no, it goes on, but that's.
Okay, but I mean, that would be, I think,
Yeah,
but I mean, that it doesn't have that other part about the amended, support the amended Article 7, because that's, I don't think that's
No,
what
that was
the
in the-
effect of this would be.
yeah, well, that's what this is, the amended Article 7. And the letter that we got from Ned said that if we supported this tonight, they wouldn't move it at town meeting.
Right, that there would be no amended Article 7
Right.
if we take this action.
Mm-hmm. So was that sufficient for a motion, what I read?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, Jane seconded.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're muted, Linda.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Nay.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Bates, nay.
Okay, that's 3 in favor and 2 opposed, and motion carries. Okay. So thank you, everyone. You know, I think this has been difficult for a number of reasons, and I think it's been clearly stated that we recognize there is a problem. The process is, in terms of how this has transpired, many of us have not appreciated. All right, thank you. The next item is select board liaison assignments. Unless there is something that is critical for action between now and town meeting, I would ask that we forgo those this evening.
I just had one question relative to the process for these. That I had heard something about, proposing 4 committees that.
Oh, sorry, Ned, for interrupting. I'm reading this.
You're ahead of yourself.
Yes, I'm ahead of myself. Forgive me. I had asked Terry to address the issue of how we want to proceed for FY22 select board liaison assignments. And so that's what this item is. So my apologies, Terry. Did you want to speak to this?
I'll be extremely brief.
Thank you.
So I would ask each continuing select board member and our new member, Henry, to please send to Jeremy by the end of this week, if possible, your top 4 choices. And if you have any schedule constraints, like Thursday morning, you can't do it or whatever it is, to send those to Jeremy by the end of this week so that I can put everything together and we can hit the ground running when we meet after town meeting. And because of tonight's meeting, you should also consider 3 new liaison things that are going to be coming up. One is Multi-Town Gas Leaks Initiative liaison. One is the Concord 250th Executive Committee. And one is on to this new Independent Citizen Committee for studying the Personnel Board. I'll say those again really quick. Multi-Town Gas Leaks Initiative, Concord 250 Executive Committee, and Independent Citizen Committee to study Personnel Board. We're going to be adding those 3 as new liaisons. Jane, you want to continue on the select board next year?
No, I just wanted to offer that whoever takes over the committees that I have been liaison to, I'm happy to meet with or talk about the process that's gone to date. And the only committee that I'm on that is critical to see quickly is the Disability Commission, because unlike most, the select board position is a voting member.
Okay, thank you. That's it for this item, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee nominations. Oh, again, I'm ahead of myself, sorry.
Oh.
This evening is a lot of things going on here. So Jane, I cannot believe that your 6-year, 3-year terms, total of 6 years, has come to an end so soon. And as we could see from your participation tonight, you are going to be sorely missed in terms of all that you've brought to us. And so in the interest for the public, we want to read a proclamation in your honor. And I know that other select board members and others may want to make comments as well. So this is a proclamation in honor of Jane C. Hotchkiss, whereas Jane C. Hotchkiss was elected by the citizens of Concord to the select board from 2015 to 2021, having previously served the town on the West Concord Advisory Committee and Sustainable Energy Committee. And whereas she served as select board chair during the 2017-18 fiscal year, meeting the challenges brought before the board with a commitment to transparency, outreach, and engagement of citizens and town government. And whereas she has served the town with distinction, being a champion for clean energy advancement and environmental sustainability, while looking for and being fearless about seeking results. And whereas her deep understanding of energy policy and environmental impact advanced Concord's goals and commitment to a greener future. And whereas she has worked with any number of town committees as select board liaison during her years of board service, including the White Pond Advisory Committee, Clean Energy Advisory Committee, Natural Resources Commission, Long Range Planning Committee, Transportation Advisory Committee, and many others, energetically challenging them with questions and directions to consider. And whereas it was not uncommon to spot her in town, helmet clad, biking to and from a select board meeting, whether in daylight or darkness, living her passion while demonstrating her sustainability principles. And whereas she has worked to safeguard the health of the public during the COVID-19 pandemic by supporting and clearly communicating social distancing policies for Concord schools, business, and public events. And whereas she, along with her current serving female select board colleagues, have been recognized as civic leaders in the 2021 Concord Museum exhibit, Every Path Laid Open, Women of Concord and a Quest for Equality. And so therefore, let it be resolved on behalf of the town that we wish to duly recognize Jane C. Hotchkiss for her spirited leadership on the select board and gratefully thank her for so ably serving the Concord community with deep commitment and drive while challenging us all to aim higher.
Hear, hear.
Absolutely.
Well, I am humbled. Thank you. I am not one for public recognition, and as my clipboard trying to block my spouse over there from videotaping me attested, this was deeply appreciated, and therefore I want to thank you all, and I want to thank my previous select board members because I was schooled and still am daily, if not weekly. And I do think there should be something in recognition, not of me, but of the entire COVID select board for having done triple duty, double duty. I mean, at least double our paychecks because, 2 times 0, it's more. But this has been a privilege, and one which I am only starting to realize how much I will miss at times. And at times I will just be on my bicycle a little bit more or doing other things. But I may be gone, but I will not allow myself to be forgotten.
I don't see how we could forget you, Jane. So any other comments? Jane, there wasn't enough room in the proclamation to list all the committees you've been on and a whole number of other things that we could have included.
Well, the only other committee I would add would be the HGC, because I think I've been on the HGC and NRC since I started. And I would hate to, to honor one and not the other, because those have been truly wonderful committees to watch, especially because they shape Concord's scale, character, along with the planning board and ZBA. But I mean, they they force a lot of individuals and residents in Concord to think about the community that they are living amongst in a way that isn't always comfortable, but I'm always impressed.
Yep.
So.
Jane, I just want to say how much I'm going to miss your ability to see the big picture and your insights that you've brought, and how that's always gotten us back on track, and you will just really be missed. Thank you so much for your service.
Ditto what Terry said, and your ability to synthesize a whole lot of information and kind of get to the core of it is very admirable trait. Thanks.
And I do hope that you come visit us sometimes in Concord and West Concord.
Yes.
Even though you're moving up north.
Exactly. Don't forget us.
Oh, believe me. I have no intention. And Stephen, I also want to send you a salute and a good luck. You took on Concord, and we continually have surprised you, as has the world, and as has, things that none of us ever could have anticipated. So good luck. And as I said to Elise at the beginning, she gave me some wise advice, which I think she re-summarized tonight as patience. But, Concord has a long history of challenging itself and those who would try to hasten its decision-making.
So I guess I was about to say, Jane, that you always made yourself available to me outside of meetings for guidance and counsel, and I am grateful for that. And I hope that I could ask for that to continue. So on a personal level, thank you. You've been a great support and sounding board. So thank you.
Well, I'm surprised that this is ending. I somehow didn't think it would. Sort of like that COVID feeling.
Well, we'll see you Sunday.
Yes, you will. You'll see me
for sure. and
hopefully not slicker.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have a chance to catch up with you, Jane, and roost you even more. So.
Thank you all. And Henry, all I can say is, seat's yours.
Oh, all right. I'm going to move on to the committee nominations. Hope you're on mute, Susan.
Jack Clymer of 13 River Street to the Tax Relief Committee for a term to expire on April 30th, 2024.
Okay. And committee appointments.
Move to accept the appointment of Rebecca LeMaitre of 3 Abbott Lane to the Historic Commission as an associate member for a term to expire on April 30th, 2022.
And that was a town manager appointment with select board approval. Yeah. Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay. And then town manager appointment where no vote is needed.
Town manager appointment, Andrea Solomon of 75 Ash Street to the Public Works Commission for a term set to expire April 30th, 2024.
Okay. And now repeat my comment about committee liaison reports. Unless there is something critical we need to know before the day of town meeting. Does anyone have something from their committee that's needed? Okay. And so any other comments from the public? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. See everyone who's able at the forum right now that's in progress for the school, middle school. Thank you, everyone.
Right, bye.